Thank you for tuning in to Look Before You Speak. It's a program that actually takes a little bit more time and energy to look at and engage in. And we've had some really exciting guests on. And today we have a very exciting guest on, Jessica Vizzutti, who's a photographer and writer here in Missoula. And she's been, has agreed to come on and talk about some of the artists that she's passionate about in Montana. And thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
We have, the program is kind of emphasizes a little bit different approach to looking at art. And as you know, commercial television usually has images up for between 1 and 2 seconds. And I think it kind of conditions us to be a little bit lazy as we look at and absorb artwork. So this program's kind of dedicated to taking a bit more time and energy and appreciating people such as yourselves that take that time and talk about and write about art. So thank you for agreeing to come on.
Yeah, my pleasure. I appreciate it.
So you brought some images.
I did, yeah. I brought some images of different artists from around Montana. We have so much talent here in Missoula, but I thought it might be fun to kind of look at some people that are around the state because the landscape really provides inspiration to people all over, and sometimes you wouldn't know about them. So.
Sure. That's great. So who do you want to look at first?
Maybe we could look at, let's see what's over there. We could look at Donna Gans first, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. She's an artist that's based in Whitefish, Montana. Yeah, here's one of her pieces here. She had a flower series that she did a couple years back, and I just really enjoyed it. But she really, she's from New York originally and came here with her husband, and he's a professionally trained artist and has exhibited in New York and been in Art in America, but she kind of varies her work between landscapes and florals, and I just really like the energy and the excitement that's in this piece, and it's kind of a different way of looking at the landscape.
Well, I think that one of the things I think about with her work is sometimes it takes being transplanted to bring a different vision about what it is. And you know, sometimes Montanans are very spoiled because they've grown up with this and have become accustomed, and they might expect a landscape to look a certain way. And sometimes when people come from a different background, they have a different enthusiasm about it, and that's certainly the case here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she really approaches it from kind of a different perspective, and I appreciate that about her. And she's kind of a perfectionist. I've been to her studio, and she's never quite done with stuff, and I can understand that tendency.
Yeah. So she's, this is an oil painting, or yeah?
Yeah, oil.
I know she works with oils and encaustic, and she also, she works pretty large scale, doesn't she?
Yeah, this is a larger scale piece, and I think all the pieces that I brought from her today are larger scale, which is kind of nice. It absorbs you when you walk in.
When she talks about these, does she talk about nature in connection to them, or painting?
I feel like she talks about nature some, but I feel like it's more painting and an experience for her when I talk with her more about it.
Well, she's a real gift to the region, and I know that sometimes it must have been a big shift for her to move from maybe a very stimulating environment to something that's a little more quiet.
Yeah.
And I wonder how she talks about that and frames that. Also.
Yeah, I know she typically makes trips back to New York. She has family there and sees them, but and I think she needs to get that fixed, and I can really understand needing that.
Sure.
But I feel like the solitude that you can find here, I really feel like that gives her space to kind of work and think, and you can really lose yourself that way, and I think that's kind of one of the ways that she works things out in the studio.
Well, we're fortunate to have her, I know that. So, and you want to talk about another artist?
Oh, sure, yeah. I brought another piece. Let's see, we could look at Michael Haken, would maybe be a good switch.
Okay.
So he's an artist that he works in oil, and it's almost photorealistic. There's a nice, beautiful piece of the Boulder River. He splits his time between Boulder, Montana, and Tucson, Arizona. And so, and I know his background, he had traveled around the world as a military kid and, you know, kind of found his root in those places. And so I really enjoy that his work, it sort of vacillates between something that's really realistic but up close examination, or sometimes, not in this piece, but other ones, it'll be further away and almost a hazy, out of focus look at something. And so his ability to kind of switch between those techniques, I think, is really versatile.
Was this pretty large piece?
It's a very large piece. It would probably, I'm trying to think, it's probably like, I think it's 2 foot by 4 foot. So yeah, really nice. And it's two separate, there's a white line in the middle, but it's one piece, but separate in two separate panels. Yeah.
I know that he kind of, some work that I've seen of his in the past, he kind of compartmentalizes the painting and maybe chops it up, and then you arrange the paintings. And what do you think that's about with him? Or
I think it's really interesting because he definitely plays with perspective and scale that way, and I feel like he has, I know he loves photography and he spends a lot of time going out hiking and spending time in nature and then coming back to the studio as a part of the process. I think that kind of dividing it up, he really looks at things at a minute level, and so kind of expanding that small focus to a larger scale.
Well, I think in some ways it relates to photography, photorealism, but also this idea with photography that you can get a micro perspective. And so the bounce around of the perspectives with photography, I think that he plays around with a lot.
I think so too. I think he's really influenced by photography and kind of changing the perspectives that way.
And he hasn't been in Montana that long, has he? Or?
He's been in Montana for a while. He did the Basin Refuge artist residency. He used to be based primarily for a while in southern Florida in the Key West area, and then he came out and did the Basin Refuge artist residency, and then I think kind of fell in love with Montana and kept coming back, and then built that studio. And
we're lucky to have him.
Yeah, he's pretty fascinating.
You want to move to another artist?
Oh, sure. I brought a lot.
Good. Well, that's good. Great.
Maybe we could take a look at one of Shauna Moore's pieces. She's based in Whitefish, and she does a lot of landscape work, and I don't know, I just really love it. It's beautiful. Large scale encaustic pieces, and
oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. This is actually a really recent piece. She just finished this one. I saw it in the studio, and
how large is this?
It's, let's see, trying to think. I think it's, I can't remember, 32 by 64.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so is the white?
The white's the wall.
Oh, the wall.
So
okay.
yeah, that's white's the wall. Sorry, there you go. Yeah.
No, that's okay.
But it's encaustic with pigment. And, you know, she really works in the layers to kind of build those colors up and gives it a real depth. And I just love it. I love the use of color. And I know that she's really influenced by Diebenkorn and Rothko and loves those things. And I think you can really see that in the colorway in this piece and the format she's using.
Yeah, I always, you know, when I see her work, I think of this thing one of my teachers used to tell me, and that was, you know, a dentist, when the dentist abstracts your tooth, it means it's taken from your mouth. And when I see her work, I always think closely taken from nature. And so I like that definition of abstraction and the abstraction related to her work, because it seems to border on what some artists call non-objective, like not having a relationship. But it's great because she talks so much about nature.
Yeah,
too.
she does. And I think what's kind of, this piece I find really, and this one too, they're really interesting because some of the colors that she's using are a little different for her. Like I think sometimes she's in a more earth tones and greens and browns. She just recently took a trip to Costa Rica, I think, for a while, and when she came back, I felt like the work really reflected that ocean color landscape.
And she teaches as well, doesn't she? She offers
does.
workshops.
Yeah, she does encaustic workshops out of her studio.
Yeah. And for those of in our audience that don't know what encaustic is. Could you talk a little bit about
Sure.
that?
Yeah, so encaustic is basically using wax and melting it and building up layers on a panel or canvas to create the artwork, and you can put color in between those layers of wax and color the wax itself to, so painting with wax.
So the surface is really, has a translucency and a depth.
Yes.
That when you look at the blue, you know, these images, even though we're looking at and talking about them, you really have to see them in person to understand the nuance of what the media is. But
Absolutely.
it's good to know.
And I think something that's kind of unique about her work is she really has like a pristine surface that's, you know, there's no ridges on it. A lot of encaustic work, they go with the texture, and she kind of goes the opposite way, and I find that interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Let's
Yeah.
look at another art. Well,
Yeah.
you brought some great people in.
Oh,
It's
good.
fun.
I think I brought a couple different pieces from Kate Hunt.
Oh, okay.
I love Kate's work, and this is from a little while back. This is actually from 2009. She did a series, this is one, where she took dollars and kind of mounted them on these steel metal pieces and then put them on the wall. And it was right after the economic, you know, collapse, and it was just really fascinating. It was installed as a wall piece where they were all dollars on a wall together, and I just thought that was really interesting because she works in newsprint and condenses it and kind of will char it, and so kind of taking that and then adding money, I just thought it was really interesting.
You know, she's an artist that, you know, when you see this work, it's like this really strong form, and also the influence of all the formalists of her day when she was going to school. But there's also this symbology, which is one of the layers, that's really unlike the formal, strict formalists in which have influenced her. So money, flags,
Absolutely.
iconography, which she is fearless about.
She really, I mean, if you're going to take a dollar and slice it up and put it on a wall, like,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
not
yeah.
really scared of very much, I don't think.
Yeah, and that, you know, all the things that people bring to it, the viewers bring to it. And so, yeah, I just really like her work.
I do too. I find it really neat, and I think here's a flag image that she did, and I just find it fascinating, and I think it takes on an extra layer of interest to me because she is working in newspaper, and that industry is something that is, you know, very American, but at the same time kind of collapsing, and so I think it adds an extra layer of interest to kind of the different pieces of America.
And there's this whole concept with her work about, well, is this really permanent?
Right.
Is there a permanence about it? But then when you go visit her studio, I mean, there's been these big newspaper pieces that have been standing out there for 20, 30 years,
Right.
you know, that hold up.
Absolutely.
And the structure and the approach is so strong that she really understands all these elements.
Yeah, she really does. And
cool.
I think it might be a close-up piece, or I don't know if I brought the image, but I have one. I think this is one that was just in the Yellowstone Art Museum's show that they just did. And yeah, I just find it really interesting that you could take something so simple and translate it in so many different ways, whether it's like a surface that it looks like it's a part of the floor, or, you know,
Yeah.
a flag hanging on your wall. And that's actually Michael Haken's work in the background.
Oh, okay.
So I thought that was kind of a nice bringing together of the different
yeah,
folks.
that's great.
He has been doing a lot more in mark making in the last 2 years, and that's a little bit of a departure from the natural imagery.
Sure.
But there's such a history of that here too, and
Yeah.
I think that's just kind of interesting. So. Yeah.
Well, let's look at another image. Oh,
Yeah,
that's some Kate's.
So that's Kate. That's the installation of the
Dollar
dollar
bills.
piece on the wall.
And did she do something to the wall there?
I think that was just the space that it was in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's just the way that it's painted. But yeah, but she had them installed that way, and you know, I just think it's pretty impactful too to kind of take each one and do it that way. It's kind of a departure from some of the other work that she does.
Yeah.
But
And Kate, of course, grew up in Montana, but was really influenced by a lot of the work and a lot of her education at the Kansas City Art Institute. And think a lot of that drive and the formal aspects of her work kind of came from that influence there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then coming back to Montana, that's different than just being plopped into Montana. So that's
Yeah.
kinda,
Yeah, kind of to remove yourself and then circle back again
Yeah,
gives
yeah,
you a different perspective. And she's not based in Missoula, she's out in Creston, and
Yeah.
her studio, there's like goats coming in, and it's kind of a wild place, but it's
Yeah.
really, it's unique, and I think it makes sense that she's kind of in a removed spot, but she can really focus in and work on that kind of work.
cool.
Yeah.
You have another artist?
I think that might be the group that I brought, but
Okay.
I'm happy to talk about any more of them.
No. Well,
any-
what kind of projects are you working on at this time?
Oh,
Do you
sure.
have
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about your own photography?
Oh.
Even though you didn't bring, that
No.
wasn't the intent, but I think we can take an opportunity
Oh, that's
to
nice.
spend a little time on that.
Yeah, so right now I'm working on a couple pieces, Artists in the Studio for Western Art and Architecture magazine. I need to get down and profile them, but yeah, so I'm going to do that. I've got a piece I'm working on about Barb Schwartz-Karst,
Oh, cool.
Missoula, Montana-based artist. And she just recently won an award for a beautiful piece she did depicting a Native American chief, and so that's a kind of a departure in her work, and I'm interested to kind of look at that. And then in my own work, I'm trying to think what I've been working on. I spent a lot of time, I haven't as much this year, but normally kind of exploring back roads of Montana and kind of wild places and the relationship between people and place. I find that really interesting. So that's typically what I end up spending time photographing when I'm not running around like a crazy lady.
Well, the community is very fortunate to have you, and
That's
thank you so
kind.
much for coming on.
Yeah.
And thanks for talking about art.
Yeah.
And we need more people like you talking about art.
Oh, well,
And
thank
so-
you for having me. I'm glad this is a great resource for everybody in the
Yeah.
community.
Well, and the program, it's also important when you talk about art to think about there's a timelessness about it that's not connected to an event or a festival and the progress that people in their studios cruise along and do this stuff, and you capture a moment, even though we may be looking at it for minutes and minutes and minutes. And is this another image here?
Oh, yeah, here's one. This is another Donna Gans.
Oh, okay.
It's so this is some of her newer work, and a lot of work she does the florals. She's really known for landscapes that are kind of segmented, but this is she's done that in the background and then put kind of a mat on top. And I just think it's really interesting playing with form and shape like that, and it was a real departure from some of the other things I'd seen from her. So I found that it's exciting to me when someone kind of moves into a new phase.
Yeah, just like this, as we're talking about this, I mean, an artist might have a different attitude about it. They may be thinking, okay, I'm done with that. and
Right.
Store it away. I don't want to look at it for. But I think having it in front of us, talking about it, slowing down, and just taking the opportunity to celebrate what progress
Yeah.
people make. So,
Absolutely, and I think it would be really challenging. I know I've watched Donna's work for a long time in particular, and I feel like she kind of has some different phases that she's moved through, and she'll be
Is this
over.
hers too?
That's hers too. That's another one from
Okay.
her floral series.
Okay.
She'll kind of, you're moving on creatively maybe before your audience is because you're in there with it every day, and so
yeah.
it's kind of exciting to see her take some risks and do some different things, even if that's not what people expect.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, I love that piece. That's also larger scale. All three of these are about the same size.
And does she experiment a little bit with encaustic as well, or
She-
is primarily oil?
She does primarily oil, but then she'll do some mixed media and kind of encaustic mixed in sometimes. So I feel like it sort of depends. Typically, it's an oil painting,
Yeah.
but then sometimes you'll get up close and she's incorporated something on the edges unexpected. And yeah, it's nice. It's good to see those kind of unexpected things.
She's really, of all the artists that you brought in today, she's really influenced by the Impressionists and less it's more European maybe in its influence than
Yeah.
American.
I could see that, and especially in some of those florals, they kind of, wispiness on the edges and stuff, a little more romantic.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
Yeah.
And what a great group of artists you brought
Oh,
for us to talk about
My
today.
pleasure. I feel lucky to get to look at great art.
Well, please tune in, and this program can be revisited and queued up on the MCAT website. So, and today's guest, Jessica Vizzutti, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.